Hi there, it is another day we get to discuss what is health, and we are still on our second dimension of health, which is emotional dimension. And on this particular day we are going to talk on emotional regulations. I really hope you find this helpful. So emotional regulation simply means how you regulate your emotions when you're faced in a situation that has really triggered your emotions. This involves how you initiate your actions, how you inhibit, that means you stop yourself from acting from the trigger, and also how you regulate the response. Emotional regulations really means is you being able to come out of a specific situation and giving yourself time to think through the situation. Because usually the more time you give yourself to think through the emotion, the more likely you are going to make rational actions and rational responses, as opposed to you responding whenever the emotions are triggered. Someone who has poor emotional regulations, really, they are at the mercy of the people and the environment, because wherever you go out, there's always something that is going to trigger your emotion. How do we tell someone who has poor emotional regulations? The first thing is, of course, they're going to have these random outbursts of anger. Most of the time, this anger is usually directed to someone who did not even trigger those emotions. So most of the anger is displaced. And you know that because maybe someone did something very random, or someone just asked a question, and then someone just gives you an answer and you fail to understand what did I do or what did I say. So if you see a person like that, just know they have poor emotional regulations. And then the second thing is that these people usually will complain of chronic body pains, and they'll be in and out of hospital for really no reason. And most of the time, all the tests done are usually normal, but they'll still insist that they're actually having pains. And the third way of knowing that a person has poor emotional regulation is that they have very poor social network, because it's very difficult for these people to build and maintain healthy relationship because of all these displaced outbursts of anger. Then the fourth way of knowing someone who has poor emotional regulation is how much they are able to really focus on meaningful work. And the reason is, it's because, you see, their emotions are at the mercy of the people in the environment. If anything that someone says or does is going to trigger your emotions, and you're going to have all these outbursts of anger. Looking at the world we live in, most of the time you actually are going to be extremely low. So for them, focusing on meaningful work becomes very difficult. Of course, now the fifth thing is that these people have very poor self-control. Again, it's because they cannot really stop and think, how is this situation, and how am I supposed to react, and is this the right way of reacting? And they are very oversensitive. They tend to overreact to literally anything. So the first way of cultivating emotional regulation is coping skills. Nurture your coping skills. We are not promised of a smooth life, but one thing that's for sure, we have the muscle, we have what it takes to sail through life successfully. So whenever you're faced in a situation that has really triggered your emotions, how do you cope? There are two ways of doing this. The first thing is the physical environment. Can you change that environment? And then the second question you need to ask yourself is, can you change the way you react to that environment? For example, you are in an office and maybe you think you have a very bad boss. So the question is, can you change the office? Maybe no. And so if you cannot change the office, can you change the circumstances that keep on happening in such a way that you triggers the negative impulses from your boss? Maybe yes. So because what you really need to understand is each one of us is different, and it is your responsibility to really be able to understand the people you live with, the people you work with, and the environment that you are put in. That way is going to really give you so much peace, because once you understand that, you know what to expect from each of the people and maybe from the environment itself. Maybe your boss is the one who has emotional regulation, it has poor emotional regulation. Instead of you really finding yourself having this back and forth argument, how about you taking the lead and understand that maybe he needs to work on himself, but because you have worked on yourself, you always need to understand that, what can I do so that I have fewer instances that I have to trigger negative emotions from my boss? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself. So maybe if he's very particular in time, maybe he needs his desk arranged in a very specific way, or maybe he needs his coffee served in a very specific way, or maybe he needs you to address him in a very specific way. Instead of, if you know that's what he wants, just give him that. And once you do that, you are going to get a soft spot on him. And once you have managed to gain his trust, you will slowly be able to tell him the truth of what you think. And maybe from there you can start building a friendship, as opposed to you really every time you have to brush each other in a negative way. And then the other thing is, maybe you have done all that and it's really not working. You might have to really choose the way you respond to the triggers that to the emotions that your boss is going to give you. Then the second thing that is also very related to that is being mindful. And being mindful simply means put yourself in the other person's shoes. So instead of you coming from a point of judgment, put yourself in that specific position and see what would you have done. Maybe it could have been better or even worse. Always practice being mindful in every circumstance that you find yourself in. And most of the time, once you practice mindfulness, you've come to realize that your emotions automatically start changing, because then you get to understand this other person better. And the third thing that you need to do to cultivate your emotional regulation is always be self-compassionate. As much as you have to be mindful, as much as you try to have all these coping skills, always remember to take care of yourself. Care for yourself just like the way you would care for other people. Because if you think maybe the environment that you are in, you think you've really tried your best and it is still not working, then maybe you might have to make a difficult decision, cutting communication or reducing communication, or just maybe even change the whole of that place for good. Or even sometimes you might have to even end relationships if you think you've given your all and it's still not working. And the fourth thing, of course, is you need to take care of your body. Practice a healthy lifestyle. That means you get time to exercise. That means you eat a very healthy, balanced diet. And you need to have a good night's sleep. You need to have at least 8 hours of sleep every single day. Poor sleep or sleep deficiency automatically puts your emotions at the edge. And someone who is sleep deprived, they tend to be extremely emotional, extremely sensitive, and you'll never even have time to have all these emotional regulations that we're talking about. And then last but not least is you need to have a good support system. Your social network has to be very good. If you're a person who prays, you can just go and start praying to God as much as you can. Just tell God whatever you want to tell, as if you're talking to someone else. And by the time you're done, you'll find that your emotions are better and you are having your peace again. I really hope this is helpful and you're going to practice emotional regulations whenever you're facing a circumstance that has triggered your emotions. It's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for taking time to watch this.